The glittering chandeliers of the Grand Convention Center cast a warm glow over the annual America's Heroes Gala. Flags draped from the ceiling, their stars and stripes shimmering under the spotlights. Thousands of voices hummed with anticipation as President Donald Trump, impeccably suited, strode onto the stage. His presence commanded the room, a palpable buzz rising as he approached the podium. His chief advisor and the event director, meticulous to a fault, stood discreetly backstage, their eyes fixed on the meticulously planned itinerary. Every speech, every pause, every transition, it was all choreographed. No one, not even they, anticipated the deviation that was about to unfold. As the president began his address, his voice resonating through the vast hall, his gaze swept across the distinguished crowd. In the front row, among a sea of decorated uniforms and civilian attire, sat retired Master Sergeant Sarah Sally Rodriguez, a U.S. Air Force veteran, somewhere between 60 and 70 years old. Her Air Force service dress, though perfectly pressed, showed the subtle wear of time, and a purple heart medal pinned to her chest seemed to absorb the light, drawing attention to its somber significance. Her shoulders shook almost imperceptibly, and silent tears tracked paths down her weathered cheeks. She wasn't seeking attention, wasn't making a scene, her grief was too raw, too profound to be contained. She simply sat, lost in a world of her own pain. President Trump's powerful words faltered. His eyes, sharp and accustomed to scanning crowds, locked onto Sarah. He looked briefly at the teleprompter, then back at her, his expression shifting from a public figure's resolve to a deeper, more empathetic concern. Without a word, he gently closed his speech folder, stepping away from the podium. A ripple of confusion spread through the audience. Backstage, his chief advisor's face tightened, a silent question in their eyes. The president simply pointed towards Sarah. "You, ma'am," he said, his voice softer now, cutting through the murmuring crowd. "What's your name?" Gasps swept the room. "What's he doing?" "This isn't on the script," people whispered, their curiosity piqued. Sarah looked up, startled, her eyes wide and red-rimmed. She blinked, unsure if President Trump was truly speaking to her. Slowly, hesitantly, she began to rise, her movements stiff, perhaps from age or from old wounds that still ached. A collective hush fell over the room as a staff member quickly moved to assist her. This was definitely not in the program, not in the script. Trump extended a hand, offering a steadying gesture. His usual public demeanor had softened, replaced by an expression of profound understanding, a man recognizing pain instantly. Sarah managed a shaky salute, wiping her tears quickly with the sleeve of her uniform. "Mr. President," she began, her voice cracking, I'm Master Sergeant Sarah Rodriguez, sir." She looked down, a wave of shame washing over her for being seen in such a vulnerable state. Trump gently placed a hand on Sarah's shoulder, his touch firm and reassuring. "Take your time, Sarah," he said softly, his microphone lowered so only she and those closest could hear. The silence in the massive hall grew heavy, reverent. Backstage, the chief advisor looked on, a mixture of alarm and curiosity on their face. They tried to signal to the president, perhaps to offer a new talking point or get him back on track, but he ignored them, his focus entirely on Sarah. Sarah took a deep, shaky breath, then looked out at the thousands of people staring back at her. Her gaze seemed to pierce through the lights, past the faces, into a distant memory. "I wasn't supposed to be here today," she said, her voice quiet, unsure, but Trump stepped back slightly, signaling the tech crew to bring her a microphone. Sarah took it, her hand trembling slightly. "My best friend, Specialist Mark Mac Collins, and I," she continued, her voice gaining a fragile strength, "we deployed together. We served side by side. We made a pact that we'd always look out for each other." She paused, her voice catching. "But, he didn't make it home." A quiet murmur of sympathy spread across the crowd. Sarah looked down at her shaking hands. "I wear this uniform with pride," she whispered, "but I carry guilt every day. I keep asking myself why I lived and he didn't." Her voice was thick with emotion, a raw, unvarnished grief. Trump's face changed, his posture softened, his eyes narrowed, focused only on Sarah. This was no longer about politics or policy. It was about something far deeper, something raw, something human. And I guess, Sarah looked up again, tears returning, I just needed someone to see me today. To see this. She gestured vaguely at herself, encompassing not just the tears, but the uniform, the hidden scars, the burden of survival. For a long moment, no one spoke. Thousands of people sat in stunned silence, watching one woman unravel years of suppressed grief. Sarah stood on that stage, exposed and vulnerable. Not just as a hero, but as a human being haunted by the past, a female veteran grappling with the unique pressures of her service and her loss. Trump cleared his throat, visibly moved. "Sarah," he said, his voice steady now, but laced with profound respect, "thank you for your courage, not just overseas, but today. Thank you for showing us your truth." The crowd stirred, many wiping their eyes, the powerful honesty of Sarah's confession cutting through the formal grandeur of the event. "I didn't lose a friend," Sarah continued, her voice stronger now, "I lost a brother. I held his hand during his last breath. And I keep asking, did I do enough?" Trump nodded slowly, then motioned for a chair to be brought to the stage. "Sit, Sarah. You're among family here." A veteran in the audience yelled, "You did enough, soldier." The crowd erupted in applause. For once, they weren't cheering for a politician. They were standing for one woman's pain, for all hidden pains. Trump turned to the audience, his gaze sweeping across the sea of faces. "How many of you here," he asked, his voice resonating through the hushed hall, "have asked that same question? Did I do enough?" Slowly, hundreds of hands rose into the air, some trembling, some strong, all bearing the silent weight of shared experience. "This isn't just Sarah's story," Trump said, pacing the stage, his tone shifting from formal address to a heartfelt conversation. "It's the story of every veteran who comes home but never truly leaves the battlefield. It's the story of every family member who lives with their sacrifice, seen or unseen." He set his prepared speech aside, the papers fluttering to the side of the podium. "We were going to talk about funding today. Numbers, budgets, programs, all important, yes. But what's more important, what's crucial, is understanding what truly happens when these brave men and women, our heroes, return. What happens to their hearts, their minds, their very souls?" He looked at Sarah, a profound empathy in his eyes. "You didn't come back broken, Master Sergeant Rodriguez. You came back with a heart too big to carry it all alone. A heart that endured what few could imagine, and still carries the weight of another's sacrifice." Sarah covered her face, overwhelmed by the outpouring of understanding and acceptance. The collective acknowledgement of her pain, of everyone's pain, was a balm to her soul. "I've spoken in hundreds of cities," Trump said, his voice steady. "But today, I'm not here to speak. I'm here to listen." The audience fell quiet again, a profound sense of shared humanity settling over them. Then, slowly, a woman in a Marine Corps uniform stood. "I lost my son in Fallujah," she said, her voice clear despite the tears streaming down her face. "I thought I was the only one still crying, still feeling this hollow ache." Another woman, older, with kind eyes, rose. "My husband served 3 tours. He doesn't sleep at night. He pretends he's fine, but his nightmares are our reality." And another, "My daughter came home from Afghanistan, but her smile didn't. She's here tonight, but she still carries the war in her eyes." Before long, dozens were standing, soldiers, widows, siblings, parents, each carrying a scar, invisible but deep. Sarah looked around in awe, her eyes wide with a mixture of sorrow and revelation. "I thought I was alone," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Trump placed a hand on her shoulder again. "You're not, Sarah. You are absolutely not. And that's what today is truly about. It's about remembering that the burden of war is not borne by one, but by many. It's about seeing each other, truly seeing each other, and standing together. Sarah looked out over the sea of faces. Faces that were no longer strangers, no longer distant figures in a vast crowd. Each one nodded with empathy, holding their own untold stories, their own silent battles. She took a shaky breath and continued, her voice gaining strength, now speaking not just for herself, but for all of them. Mac was the guy who always made us laugh, even in the toughest situations. He carried photos of his baby girl, Chloe, in his helmet, tucked safely behind the Kevlar. He dreamed of becoming a nurse after the army, helping people on a different kind of frontline. Sarah's voice quivered, the memories vivid and painful. But during a reconnaissance mission near Kandahar, our patrol was ambushed. I made it out with a fractured rib and shrapnel wounds. Mac, he didn't. The words tore from her throat, raw and agonizing. I remember the dust, the sound of the gunfire, the last thing he said. Tell my little girl I love her. I've tried for years, she confessed, her voice barely a whisper, but I've never found her. I don't even know where she is. It's been my greatest regret, my biggest failure. The crowd hung on to every word, many openly weeping. Trump, visibly shaken, leaned toward Sarah, his voice hushed. Do you remember her name, Sarah? The little girl? Sarah nodded, fresh tears on her cheeks. Chloe. She was 3. Trump turned to his team off stage, his chief advisor now looking less anxious and more intently focused. The president gave a subtle, almost imperceptible signal. No one in the audience knew what it meant, but backstage, something significant had been set in motion. Sarah, Trump said, his voice clear and resonant once more, if there's one thing I've learned, it's that no child of a fallen soldier should ever grow up not knowing how much they were loved, how much their parents sacrificed. Sarah blinked, a flicker of hope in her eyes. Sir, do you mean? Trump only gave a small, knowing smile. Let's just say we're going to try something extraordinary. Behind the scenes, staffers sprang into action, including the chief advisor. They began making calls, coordinating with military records, survivor benefits offices, and state archives, anything that could lead them to specialist Mark Collins's daughter, Chloe. On stage, Trump turned back to the audience. We speak a lot about numbers in Washington, but here's a number that truly matters. 22 veterans take their lives every single day. That's not just a number. That's 22 stories, 22 families, 22 futures cut short. Sarah nodded, tears still on her cheeks. I nearly became one of them, she whispered, her voice raw with past pain. Trump paused, his eyes fixed on her. But you didn't, Sarah. And now, your voice, your bravery in sharing your truth today, may be what saves someone else. It may be the bridge for countless others walking in silent pain. A teen in the crowd stood, shyly. My brother tried to take his life last year, he said, his voice trembling. He's in recovery now. He thought no one would understand what he went through. He still thinks he's weak. Sarah looked at the boy, her eyes wide with understanding. Tell him he's not weak. Tell him he's human. Tell him he's brave for fighting, every single day. Trump gestured to the crowd, encompassing the standing figures, the tears, the shared vulnerability. This right here, is what healing looks like. It starts when we stop pretending and start speaking. When we acknowledge the unseen wounds and offer a hand. What began as a formal political event had transformed into something raw, vulnerable, and profoundly necessary. And somewhere in a quiet neighborhood, a girl named Chloe was about to learn something that would change her life forever. In a quiet town in Oregon, 14-year-old Chloe Collins was brushing her hair in the mirror, her mind miles away. She had no idea that her name had just been spoken on national television, on a stage thousands of miles away. Raised by her mother, who rarely spoke of the past, Chloe only knew that her father, Mark Collins, had died in a war she didn't fully understand. The photos in the drawer were fading, the stories few and guarded, shielded by a mother's silent grief. Mom, she'd asked just that morning, a longing she couldn't explain stirring within her, did Dad ever talk about me before he died? Her mother had paused, her back to Chloe. He loved you more than anything, honey. That's all you need to know. But it wasn't all. Chloe felt a hollow ache, a piece of her past missing. Then, the doorbell rang. Outside stood two stern-faced Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, agents in dark suits. Mrs. Collins, one said, his voice calm but authoritative, we're here on behalf of President Trump. He's looking for your daughter, Chloe. Chloe's eyes widened, her reflection in the mirror mirroring her shock. For me. Back in Washington, D.C., as the gala continued with other speakers, President Trump received a small, sealed envelope from his chief advisor. The advisor's face, once tight with concern, now held a look of profound relief and even awe. Trump opened it, scanned the contents, and then turned to Sarah, who was still on stage, a quiet strength settling over her. They found her, Sarah, he announced, his voice carrying the weight of the moment. Sarah's knees nearly buckled. They did? Her voice was a fragile whisper. Yes. She's in Oregon, 14 years old. Her mother kept her father's memory alive, but she never knew the full story until now. The crowd cheered, but Sarah could barely breathe. Her chest rose and fell in heavy, shaky waves. Trump handed her another letter, this one unfolded. It's from her. She wrote back. Sarah opened it slowly, her trembling fingers caressing the paper. Dear Master Sergeant Rodriguez, it began, her voice hoarse as she read aloud. My mom told me about you. She said my dad loved you like a sister. She said he would have wanted me to meet you. Sarah paused, a sob escaping her lips. The letter ended with, if you still remember him, maybe you can help me remember him, too. Sarah openly sobbed now, tears of release and overwhelming emotion. Trump stood beside her, his hand resting gently on her shoulder, murmuring, we'll fly you to her tomorrow, Sarah. A private jet will be arranged. The woman who had once believed she had nothing left to give, burdened by survivor's guilt, now held the key to a girl's lost memories, and perhaps, her own salvation. The next morning, Sarah boarded a private jet, provided by the event organizers and facilitated by the chief advisor and their team, bound for Oregon. She stared out the window, the letter clutched in her hand, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and exhilarating hope. After years of silence, shame, and the crushing weight of survivor's guilt, something inside her had irrevocably shifted. She was no longer just surviving, she was finally living, carrying a new purpose. In that quiet Oregon town, Chloe stood by the window, her backpack at her feet, nervously twisting her fingers. Her mother tried to smile, a fragile attempt at reassurance. He's here for you, honey. But I think you'll find, he needed this, too. When Sarah stepped out of the car, a sturdy, yet slightly worn woman in her Air Force uniform, Chloe's eyes welled with tears. She didn't know this woman, not truly. Yet something about her presence, the way she carried herself, the kind, weary lines around her eyes, made Chloe's chest ache with a profound, unidentifiable emotion. Sarah approached slowly. Hi, Chloe. I'm Sarah. Your dad was my best friend. My brother. Chloe swallowed hard, her voice barely a whisper. Do you remember what he sounded like? Sarah smiled, though her lips trembled. I remember everything. Sarah sat across from Chloe and her mother, in the familiar, slightly worn living room. She pulled a small, military-issue canvas bag from her backpack. Inside were photos, Mac's dog tags, and a worn journal. Max, she explained softly, her voice thick with emotion. I've carried this for 15 years. I wasn't sure what to do with it, but I think he meant for you to have it. Chloe carefully opened the journal. Her father's handwriting danced across the pages, letters to her, memories of her first steps, hopes for her future, all written in a hand she'd never seen before. Tears slid silently down her cheeks. Sarah, her voice a low murmur, recited stories of Mac's terrible jokes, his fiercely protective nature, how he'd talk about Chloe every single day, his dreams of becoming a nurse after the army. "I used to get so tired of hearing about you," Sarah said, a small, sad smile touching her lips. "But now, I wish I'd listened even more." That night, Chloe asked, her voice barely audible, will you come back?" Sarah answered without hesitation, her eyes meeting Chloe's. "I never really left your family, Chloe. I just didn't know how to come home." The next morning, Sarah joined Chloe and her mom for breakfast. It was quiet at first, a comfortable silence, until Chloe, emboldened by the previous day's revelations, asked, "Did Dad ever do anything embarrassing?" Sarah chuckled, a sound that seemed to chase away some of the lingering sadness. "Oh, honey, you have no idea. Once, during a particularly tough field exercise, he tripped while carrying a massive pack and faceplanted directly into a muddy puddle right in front of our commanding officer. We called him Muddy Mac for a month, and he absolutely hated it." Chloe laughed, a clear, unrestrained sound that hadn't echoed in that house in years. Her mother smiled through her tears, watching her daughter, truly seeing her joy. "She needed that," her mother whispered to Sarah. "We both did." Sarah nodded, a peaceful look on her face. "Me, too." Later that day, they walked to the park where Chloe used to play as a toddler. Sarah pointed to the swings. "Your dad used to say, someday she'll swing so high, she'll touch the clouds." He meant that literally and emotionally. He always believed you'd reach for the impossible. Chloe looked up at the sky, a pensive expression on her face. "He sounds like a dreamer." He was, Sarah confirmed. "And you're the dream he never got to see grow up. The dream that's still unfolding." In that moment, they weren't just a veteran and a girl. They were a family rebuilt from memory and love, a tapestry woven with shared grief and renewed hope. As Sarah helped Chloe fix her bike chain that afternoon, her phone rang. It was President Trump. "I hope I'm not interrupting," Trump said, his voice jovial. "Not at all, sir," Sarah replied, a warmth in her voice. "I just wanted to say thank you. Your story, Sarah, it's reached millions overnight. We've received letters, emails, even unprecedented donations to veteran mental health programs, all because you spoke your truth." Sarah was stunned. "I just told the truth, sir." "That's exactly what people needed," Trump said. "And there's one more thing." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. "Yes, sir. We'd like you and Chloe to speak at the annual National Heroes Memorial Dinner in D.C. You've started something bigger than you know, Sarah. A movement." Sarah looked at Chloe, who was now smiling in the sunlight, completely oblivious to the call. "We'll be there, sir," she said, a new resolve in her voice. The gala hall in Washington, D.C. shimmered with lights and flags once more. The room was filled with decorated generals, Gold Star families, and public figures. But the spotlight wasn't on them tonight. It was on retired Master Sergeant Sarah Rodriguez and Chloe Collins. Trump took the stage first. "Tonight," he began, his voice resonating through the room, "we honor not only those who served, but those who carry the stories forward. And no story has touched our hearts, has truly awakened our nation, like the one you're about to hear." He stepped aside as Sarah walked up, hand in hand with Chloe, a quiet strength emanating from them both. Sarah began, her voice steady and clear. "I stood in front of thousands last week and told them I didn't think I did enough." She paused, her gaze sweeping the room. "But sometimes, doing enough isn't about saving someone's life in a moment of combat. It's about saving their memory. It's about ensuring their legacy lives on." She gestured to Chloe, a tender smile on her face. "This," she said, her voice filled with pride, "this is Mac's legacy. Not the medals, not the uniform. Her. And I get to know her, to help her remember him, because someone saw me crying and decided to ask why. Because someone stopped and truly listened. The crowd rose in thunderous applause, many in tears, their hearts open. The next day, Sarah and Chloe visited Arlington National Cemetery. They stood at Mac's grave, a simple, white headstone. Sarah, in her full-service uniform, stood tall, while Chloe knelt beside the headstone, holding a single, vibrant sunflower. "Hi, Dad," Chloe whispered, her voice soft but clear. "I read your journal. I know you loved me. I love you, too." Sarah placed a hand on the cool stone. "I finally found her, brother. She's everything you said she'd be." Chloe added softly, "Thank you for being brave, Dad. I'll try to be brave, too." They stood in silence, the breeze rustling through the trees, the distant sound of a bugle playing taps echoing across the hills. For Sarah, it wasn't closure. It was connection, a profound and sacred bond. And for Chloe, it was the beginning of truly understanding where she came from, the legacy she carried. Back in the nation's homes, footage of Sarah's impromptu speech and reunion with Chloe had gone viral. News outlets played clips on repeat. Social media overflowed with messages, "This reminded me to call my veteran mom. I served. I cried watching this. I finally told my kids about their grandfather." Mental health organizations saw spikes in veterans reaching out, particularly women seeking support. Sarah received thousands of messages from fellow soldiers, some asking for help, some simply saying thank you. She realized something crucial: her pain wasn't a weakness, it was a bridge. And Chloe, she'd started a blog called Letters to Dad, where she posted excerpts from Mac's journal, her own reflections, and notes to other kids who had lost a parent in service. A movement had begun from one tear on one stage. Weeks later, Trump invited Sarah, Chloe, and her mother to the White House. "I wanted to thank you in person," Trump said, greeting them in the Oval Office. He handed Sarah a certificate signed personally. "You reminded this nation of something important. Behind every flag-draped coffin is a family, a future, and a story that deserves to be told." And Master Sergeant Rodriguez, he turned to her, "You showed us the strength and sacrifice of our women veterans, and the enduring impact of their service." He then turned to Chloe. "And you, young lady, are helping others heal. Your blog is extraordinary." Chloe blushed. "Thank you, sir. I just want kids like me to know they're not alone." Trump grinned. "You're a writer now, Chloe. A powerful one." Sarah laughed, tears in her eyes. "Her dad would have been so proud, sir." Trump nodded. "So are we, Master Sergeant. So are we." Chloe was invited to speak at her school's Veterans Day assembly. Sarah sat in the front row, her heart full. On stage, Chloe held up her father's journal. "This is a gift," she said, her voice clear and confident, "from a soldier who never made it home. But his best friend did, and that friend helped me learn who my dad was, and who I am." She shared entries from the journal and photos Sarah had given her. The student sat still, silent, hanging on to every word. "This uniform," Chloe concluded, holding up a small, folded Air Force flag, "doesn't just represent war. It represents love, sacrifice, and hope. It represents the courage to remember, and the strength to heal." When she finished, the entire school rose to its feet in a standing ovation. Sarah wiped away a tear. Mac had made it home, just not in the way anyone expected. With help from donors and veteran groups, Sarah and Chloe started the Mac Collins Legacy Project, a non-profit focused on connecting children of fallen soldiers with surviving comrades who knew their parents. The mission was simple: no child should grow up without their story. Letters poured in. Soldiers volunteered. Kids reached out. Chloe personally answered dozens each week, her blog becoming a beacon of hope. Sarah hosted monthly gatherings where stories were shared, laughter returned, and healing took root. Veterans began to speak. Kids began to understand. Families found hope. And in every photo, a single, vibrant sunflower was present, Chloe's tribute to her father's warmth and the enduring light he brought to their lives. What started as grief had grown into a powerful, transformative legacy. A year after the gala, President Trump returned to Washington, D.C. for another major address. This time, Sarah and Chloe were on stage from the very beginning. Trump smiled at the crowd. "Last year," he began, his voice strong, "I went off script because I saw a woman crying. I didn't know it would lead to a movement. I didn't know it would ignite such an incredible wave of healing and understanding." He turned to Sarah. "Thank you, Master Sergeant Rodriguez, for being brave enough to share your pain." Then to Chloe. "And thank you, Chloe, for being the reminder that service doesn't end when the uniform comes off. That love transcends loss, and that legacies are built through remembrance." Chloe stepped forward, her voice clear and resonant. "My dad died a hero, but now he's more than a folded flag. He's a story we're still writing. A story of hope, connection, and the unwavering strength of military families." The audience erupted in applause and tears, their hearts swelling with emotion. Later that evening, as the crowd dispersed and the lights dimmed, Sarah and Chloe stood together looking out over the empty hall. "What made you speak up that day, Sarah?" Chloe asked her, her voice soft in the stillness. Sarah smiled, a peaceful contentment on her face. "I don't know, honey. Maybe it was just time. Time to let the pain out, and let the healing in. And Mr. Trump," Chloe mused, "he didn't plan any of it." Sarah shook her head gently. "None of it was in the script, Chloe. But maybe that's why it mattered so much." Chloe leaned against her arm, a comfortable silence settling between them. "I think Dad would have liked that," she said. Sarah nodded, her gaze fixed on the empty stage. "He always said the best parts of life are the ones you don't plan." In the quiet stillness of the evening, they walked off stage, two lives forever changed because someone stopped and listened, and the world finally did too.